I died, and in that very instant everything I thought I knew about prayer, about silence, and about the hidden corners of the soul was torn apart and remade before my eyes. When you leave your body behind, when your last breath slips away and the weight of flesh no longer ties you down, the mind sharpens to a point you never imagined possible. It is not like falling asleep, it is not like dreaming. It is clarity, raw and shocking, and it was in that state that I encountered him. Jesus. Not the abstract figure I heard about in sermons, not the distant symbol painted on stained glass, but a presence so real that every nerve in what felt like my spirit trembled. His gaze was not the kind that inspects or accuses. It was a gaze that pierced with understanding, and in that gaze was the truth of my life, my prayers, and the moments I thought went unnoticed. I remember the darkness that wrapped around me right after the heartbeat stopped. It wasn't frightening at first. It was like standing in a vast space suspended without sound. Then gradually light began to seep through, not from a single point but from everywhere at once. That light was warm, alive, and I could feel it entering me, not burning, not blinding, but revealing. In that glow, memories started replaying, not random flashes but specific ones. Scenes of me sitting alone, lips sealed, praying only in thought, hoping God would hear even though I never said a word out loud. At the time, I wondered whether those silent prayers had any weight at all. And then, in that place between death and eternity, Jesus revealed it to me. He showed me that every thought offered with sincerity had substance. I saw them, like sparks rising into the air, invisible in the physical world but dazzling in the spiritual. Words spoken aloud have power, yes, but thoughts whispered from the depth of the heart carry a vibration just as real. They move through the unseen realm like waves, subtle yet unstoppable. And in those moments when I believed no one was listening, he showed me that he was listening more closely than ever. The silence was never empty. The silence was sacred. Yet it wasn't just a comforting vision. There was correction too. He revealed the prayers I had thoughtlessly repeated in my mind, the ones done more out of habit than devotion. Those thoughts, though still received, were weak, thin, lacking the fire of true intention. Prayer is not about formality or volume, he said, it is about alignment. When your thought carries the weight of your soul, it resounds through eternity. But when it is casual, distracted, half-hearted, it fades almost as soon as it is born. That truth struck me hard, because I realized how many of my so-called prayers had been hollow, how often I had spoken to God without really turning toward him. The revelation didn't stop there. Jesus let me witness the unseen effect of those thought prayers on others. I saw how, in moments when I silently prayed for a friend, a subtle light enveloped them. It didn't always change their choices because free will remains untouched, but it brought strength, courage, and sometimes even sudden clarity that altered the path of their day. That was astonishing. I had always assumed prayer was like sending a message into the void, uncertain if it ever reached its destination. But in this place I saw the trail it left, the impact it carried, the living thread that connected thought to reality. There was also a warning, one that cut deep. The mind is powerful and every thought shapes something. When prayer is negative, when it carries bitterness or curses, even unspoken, it also leaves a mark. Jesus showed me moments where I had wished ill, not saying it aloud but entertaining it in my heart, and I saw how that darkness tried to attach itself to the person I had thought about. It wasn't permanent because God's grace shields, but it had weight nonetheless. I realized then that thoughts are not private whispers. They are seeds cast into the unseen, and they either bloom into light or grow into weeds of shadow. At this point in the vision I felt overwhelmed. I wanted to turn away, but his presence held me, not with force but with love. He made it clear, nothing in your mind is lost. Every prayer, every thought, every silent plea, it all counts. But the quality of it is what matters most. Sincerity is the language of heaven. And in that moment, I understood why so many people underestimate prayer in thought alone. We think it has to be formal, spoken, structured. Yet he was showing me that sometimes the most powerful prayer is the one too deep for words, when your soul simply reaches out in silence and he meets you there. If you are listening to this and wondering whether your silent prayers matter, let me tell you, they do. More than you realize. They are not lesser, they are not weaker. They are threads woven into the fabric of eternity, noticed by the one who sees everything. And if you're feeling this revelation stir something in you, don't just let it pass. Stay here, subscribe, because what comes next in testimonies like this will reshape how you see the world and your own life of faith. Jesus then led me further, into what I can only describe as a review of my inner life. It wasn't about my deeds alone, but about the hidden life of the mind. Every time I thought I was praying in secret, it was as if a record had been kept, not to condemn but to reveal the truth. I saw times when I sat in a crowded bus, silently asking for protection. Times when I lay in bed thinking of a loved one's safety. Times when I walked under the weight of anxiety and simply thought, Lord, help me. And each one of those had been heard, received, treasured. Not a single one was wasted. But he also showed me how prayer and thought, while powerful, could become richer when combined with action. Thought is the spark, but action is the flame. If you pray silently for the poor but never move your hands to help them, the prayer remains incomplete. If you think about forgiveness but never speak the words or live the act, the thought stays locked inside. Silent prayer is holy, but it is also an invitation. It calls you to let what is born in thought manifest in the world. That was one of the greatest revelations I carried back. The journey through that encounter stretched beyond what words can fully hold. There were scenes of light, choirs of voices that seemed to emerge from silence itself, each tone a living prayer. I understood then why Scripture says that the Spirit intercedes with groans too deep for words. The universe is alive with prayer, not only in spoken words but in currents of thought, in sighs of the soul, in longings that never find language. And all of it rises to God. And let me leave you with this: don't let your silent prayers end in silence. Speak them when you can, act on them when you must, and trust them always. Your mind is not just a container of thoughts, it is a temple where the Spirit listens. And if this revelation has opened your eyes even a little, then stay close. Subscribe now, because there are more truths to uncover, more testimonies to share, more glimpses of eternity waiting to be told. What happened to me was not meant only for me. It was meant for you too. And if you let it, it will change the way you pray forever. Now, when I say your mind is not just a container of thoughts, I need you to really understand the depth of that. I saw it, and it was far more vivid than any metaphor we can use here on earth. It wasn't like a box filled with fleeting ideas, nor like a machine processing electrical impulses. No, it was alive. The mind, in the light of eternity, appeared as something radiant, shaped like flowing rivers of energy, with every current carrying intention, emotion, and spirit. When I prayed silently, those currents glowed in different shades. Prayers of gratitude shone like golden light, vibrant and strong, almost melodic. Prayers of fear had a dimmer glow like silver smoke, but still they rose, and Jesus showed me that even in fear, even in weakness, those prayers reached him because sincerity gave them weight. Imagine this: every thought of genuine prayer is like incense rising in a temple, but not the kind you burn and see dissipate into the air. It was living incense, each particle carrying a note of the soul. I could see prayers I had made long ago, drifting like beams of light still traveling across the universe. Some had already reached their purpose. Others were still moving forward, weaving their way into someone's story, preparing the right moment for impact. And it wasn't just mine. I caught glimpses of millions of such prayers, thought prayers from people across the world, weaving a tapestry in the invisible realm. It was so intricate, so alive, that I realized prayer is not a solitary act. It is collective. It ties one soul to another across time and space. Jesus explained without words, he didn't need to speak for me to understand, that the mind is sacred because it was designed as a meeting place. Every time you close your eyes and think his name, you are stepping into that meeting place. Whether you feel it or not, you are not alone there. And the astonishing part was seeing how he responded even to the smallest flicker of thought. Once in my life I had simply thought, God, are you real? It wasn't even a formal prayer, just a fleeting thought during a night of doubt. In this revelation, he showed me that moment, and I saw how immediately his presence leaned in closer, tender, attentive, like a father bending down to listen to a child's whisper. That humbled me more than anything else, because it meant that not one thought directed toward him is overlooked. But there is another detail, one that startled me. He let me perceive what happens when our thoughts are divided. When a person prays in thought but simultaneously entertains doubt or distraction, the current of that prayer becomes fractured. I saw prayers that began with brilliance but then dimmed because the mind wandered, because attention slipped away. Not that he rejected them, no, he receives them all, but their power was weakened. It was like watching a strong stream suddenly break into smaller trickles. And that showed me the importance of focus, of truly offering the mind as a vessel and not just letting half of it drift elsewhere. Silent prayer is not a shortcut. It requires just as much devotion as spoken words, if not more. There was also an image of prayers that never left the mind, prayers that stayed locked because the person didn't allow themselves to release them fully. I could see the weight of unspoken anger, the burden of thoughts that were never surrendered to him, and how those unoffered thoughts pressed heavily on the soul. Jesus revealed that prayer in thought is powerful, but only when it is surrendered. Holding it back out of fear, shame, or pride keeps it bound. The moment it is truly given, whether spoken or silent, it becomes light, it rises, it breathes. That was profound because I realized how often I had kept thoughts bottled up instead of releasing them as prayer. And then there was this: the temple of the mind is not silent in the way we think. It hums, it resonates, it has a sound but not one you can hear with ears. When I prayed in thought, the mind sang in tones, invisible vibrations that joined a greater harmony. The closer the thought was to love, the clearer the sound; the closer it was to resentment, the more distorted the tone. And yet, Jesus listened even to the distorted ones, not with condemnation, but with patience, as though inviting them to tune back into harmony. This detail stunned me because it meant our very thoughts are part of a symphony, and He is the conductor who can transform even the broken notes into something redemptive. I cannot stress enough how real this was. It was not imagination, not metaphor. It was a revelation of what silent prayer looks like from eternity's perspective. And if you are hearing this now, think carefully about the next time you close your eyes and whisper a thought to God. Understand that you are stepping into that living temple, that your thought will shine, it will resonate, it will travel. Do not belittle it. Do not dismiss it. It is more powerful than you know. And if you want to continue uncovering revelations like this, then make sure you stay connected here. Hit that subscribe button now because there are depths to prayer and to life after death that few dare to speak of, but we will. Do not belittle it. Do not dismiss it. It is more powerful than you know. And if you want to continue uncovering revelations like this, then make sure you stay connected here. Hit that subscribe button now because there are depths to prayer and to life after death that few dare to speak of, but we will. When I say it is more powerful than you know, let me describe what I truly mean because the details are not vague, they are precise and unforgettable. Each silent prayer was not only a spark of light or a tone of resonance. It carried texture, movement, and even fragrance. Yes, fragrance. I saw prayers of gratitude rise with a sweetness like blooming flowers, while prayers born of sorrow carried the sharp scent of rain falling on dry earth. It was not metaphorical, it was tangible in that realm. Every thought prayer released something into the atmosphere, an offering that changed the very air around it. The colors too were not random. Golden hues appeared with selfless prayers, those uttered in love for others. Deep blues shone when the prayer was contemplative, reflective, almost like still waters holding the sky. Crimson glows pulsed when prayers carried urgency, when the soul cried out in desperation. And then there were the dull, grayish tones of distracted or half-hearted thoughts, prayers that lacked true surrender. They still rose, but they carried less vitality, less energy. Jesus showed me all this not to shame but to teach. He wanted me to see how intention paints the unseen. And the sounds, how can I describe them to you? Imagine hearing not with ears but with the entire soul, every part of your being absorbing the vibration of those thought prayers. Some sounded like strings gently plucked, each note pure and sustained. Others resembled choirs hidden in the distance, faint but beautiful. Yet there were also broken sounds, dissonant like instruments out of tune. These came from thoughts that mixed prayer with resentment or doubt. Still, even the broken sounds were caught in His presence, gently reshaped, not discarded. That patience was overwhelming because it meant He never throws away even the weakest attempt. He listens, He holds, He redeems. I also perceived weight. Every thought carried a density. Sincere, faith-filled prayers were heavy with substance like precious metals. They sank deep into the eternal fabric, impossible to ignore. Casual or distracted thoughts were light, almost hollow like empty shells drifting in the wind. Again, not rejected, but lacking the gravity to anchor themselves deeply. Jesus impressed on me that the weight of a prayer is not in its length, nor in its poetry, but in the alignment of the soul. A single genuine thought, "Help me, Lord," weighed more than 100 empty repetitions. That revelation humbled me to the core. Another detail, the prayers in thought were not bound by language. I saw thoughts rise from people of every culture, every tongue, yet in that place they were not fragmented. The essence of the prayer transcended words. It was the intention, the surrender, the love or desperation behind the thought that carried the true meaning. In eternity there is no barrier of vocabulary, no limit of grammar. A silent cry from a child in one corner of the world shone with the same clarity as a whispered reflection from a scholar in another. All were heard. All were woven into the same tapestry. And this tapestry, this is where it becomes breathtaking. Imagine an infinite expanse stretched before you, each thread a prayer. They crossed, intertwined, strengthened each other. Sometimes I saw one person's thought prayer answer the longing of another across the globe. For example, someone silently praying for guidance unknowingly received strength from another person's prayer for comfort thousands of miles away. In that realm there were no coincidences. Thought prayers intersected in ways beyond human planning, orchestrated by divine wisdom. That is why no prayer is wasted, even if we never see its result in our lifetime. What also struck me was the visibility of time. In thought prayers, time did not exist the way it does here. A prayer you thought years ago was still alive, still present, still glowing. It hadn't vanished into the past. Eternity does not discard what is offered in sincerity. This meant that every authentic thought I had ever released toward God was still part of the living record, echoing, resonating, contributing to the eternal harmony. When I realized this, I felt both awe and conviction because it meant my careless thoughts, my quick judgments, were also preserved in some form. Nothing is forgotten, though grace covers what is surrendered. And above it all, Jesus stood not as a distant observer but as the center, the anchor, the interpreter of every thought prayer. He was not overwhelmed by the countless voices. Instead, his presence was vast enough to hold them all, personal enough to respond to each. His listening was not passive. It was active, engaged, and filled with love. When a thought prayer rose, I could see his light bending toward it, acknowledging it, shaping its journey. That was perhaps the most beautiful detail of all, the assurance that silent prayers do not drift aimlessly. They are directed, guided, embraced. So when I tell you not to belittle silent prayer, I mean it with every fiber of my being. It is sight, sound, weight, color, fragrance, resonance, all at once. It is communication far beyond what human senses can grasp, and yet it is available to every one of us, every moment of the day. And if you have ever wondered whether your hidden thoughts, your unspoken cries, matter to God, let this testimony burn into your heart. They do. More than you could ever imagine. So, when I insist you should never dismiss the power of silent prayer, understand that it is not because of wishful thinking or poetic sentiment. It is because I saw its form, its weight, its fragrance, its resonance, its ripple through eternity. Every hidden thought whispered to God is real, alive, and transformative. And if this testimony has stirred something in you, if you feel the pull to see prayer not as routine but as the lifeblood of your soul, then do not walk away. Subscribe here, stay connected, because what I have begun to describe is only the surface of what was revealed, and the depths waiting to be shared will change not only how you pray, but how you see yourself in the eyes of eternity. Let me dwell more on those depths, because even in that single timeless revelation, every detail unfolded with layers beyond comprehension. What overwhelmed me most was how Jesus himself stood in relation to these thought prayers. He was not a passive witness observing from a distance. His very presence interacted with them, as if every spark of thought that rose was instantly drawn into his light. Imagine the way sunlight touches every particle of dust in a room, illuminating even the smallest speck, except this was infinitely more profound. His light did not merely reveal the prayers, it nurtured them like soil drawing water into roots. His presence radiated warmth that was not heat but recognition. Each thought prayer that approached him was enveloped, acknowledged, and transformed by his essence. When a prayer of love reached him, his radiance intensified around it, multiplying its beauty. When a prayer of fear or desperation rose, his light steadied it, calming its trembling form. Even the fractured prayers, the ones half prayer, half doubt, were not rejected. He reached into them not to erase the weakness, but to strengthen the part that was true. This detail left me in awe, because it meant he is not looking for perfection but for sincerity no matter how fragile. The way his eyes moved, though moved is too small a word, was astonishing. They did not shift from prayer to prayer as if scanning a crowd. Instead, his gaze encompassed everything at once, while at the same time being profoundly personal. I felt as if he looked directly into me fully without distraction, while also tending to every thought prayer across all creation. It was not division of attention, it was fullness of attention. That is something impossible for the human mind to grasp, yet undeniable in his presence. His hands, again words fail here, were open, extended as if receiving. But more than receiving, they were shaping. Thought prayers entered his hands like clay and emerged more radiant, more complete. Gratitude grew richer, petitions became sharper in clarity, and broken cries were softened into harmony. It was as though he was both the listener and the potter, molding every thought into something aligned with the Father's will. Watching this, I realized prayer is never wasted effort. Even the most disorganized thought is gathered by him and given form. His voice, though he did not always speak, was embedded in the atmosphere itself. At times it was a whisper without sound, simply understood. Other times, it was like thunder wrapped in gentleness, resonating not in ears but in the core of being. Through this voice, he communicated not only answers but reassurance, not only guidance but love. And even when silent, the silence of his presence spoke louder than words. It said, "I am here. I hear you. I know." Every aspect of him interacted with the prayers. His robes, radiant and flowing like living light, seemed to absorb and reflect the colors of the prayers around him. When a golden prayer of love rose, his garments shimmered with deeper gold. When a crimson plea of urgency approached, a streak of crimson traced across his form as though acknowledging it. It was not theatrics. It was communion, the visible proof that he shares in the prayers, that he is not outside of them but within them. Even the space around him bore witness. The ground beneath his feet, though it did not resemble earthly ground, pulsed with life whenever a thought prayer touched it. It was as if creation itself rejoiced at each act of communion between human souls and their Creator. Waves of light rippled outward, touching everything in sight. Nothing remained untouched by a single thought sincerely lifted to him. And there was fragrance surrounding him as well, distinct from the fragrances of individual prayers. His presence carried its own aroma, indescribable yet unforgettable. It was both sweet and strong, both soothing and exhilarating, the kind of fragrance that made you want to never breathe anything else again. When thought prayers entered his presence, their individual fragrances blended with his, becoming part of a greater perfume of eternity. This merging was not the loss of identity but the fulfillment of it, as if every prayer found its true essence only when united with him. So I repeat, do not dismiss silent prayer. Not because I want to convince you with ideas, but because I saw what happens when those thoughts reach him. He is not distant, not indifferent, not distracted. He is intimately present, gathering, shaping, responding. Each unspoken cry is caught in his hands, reflected in his light, carried in his garments, and answered in his voice. To belittle silent prayer is to misunderstand the magnitude of his attention, the depth of his love, and the reality of his presence.